Okay, so far in this section, we've learnt what a string is and how to create them. We've seen how we can access elements of a string by indexing, so using square brackets after the object name. We've seen how we can access a range of elements using slicing syntax. We now understand that strings are immutable, so elements can't be changed or deleted, but the entire variable itself can have a completely new string and can be deleted in its entirety. We've looked at string concatenation, so adding strings together, and we've just seen string membership, so checking to see if a string is in another string. But we haven't actually done much with the string itself. So for example, when you're writing on a piece of paper, you may write in all lowercase, but sometimes you might want to shout and therefore write in all uppercase. So you can transform a string depending on your need. And this would be an example of doing something to the string. Now there are many different things we can do with strings, and these things are known as methods. So let me explain an easy way to navigate a string object in Jupyter Notebook. First of all, we'll create a variable called sentence, and we'll set this equal to I love in capital letters, then we'll put learning, and then we'll put Python with a capital P. So I love learning Python. So we know that if we now take a look to see what's stored inside of the variable sentence, we get I love learning Python returned to the screen. So what can we do with this? Well, we can use what is known as dot notation to access specific attributes and methods that we can use on this string object. So we know that if we pass the variable sentence into the built-in type function, we observe that it's a string object. So if we place a dot, we can then access the attributes and methods that are available on this object. And an easy way to see what is available is by pressing Tab in Jupyter Notebook. When we press Tab, we get a long list of different methods that we can call upon on this object. So we can use the capitalize method, we can use the count, ends with. If I scroll down, you can see we have index, is alpha, is digit, we have join, lower, and so on. So there's a lot of methods that we can use, and you may be thinking, well, what do each of these methods do, and how can I remember them all? Well, in short, you don't have to. So for example, if I select the first one, which is capitalize, what we are doing here is accessing the capitalize method on that object. And in order to execute a method, we need to put parentheses at the end. Inside parentheses, if I press Shift and Tab, I get a short docstring telling us what this method will do. And if I press Shift and Tab twice, we get slightly more detail. So you can see that this specific method will return a capitalized version of the string. More specifically, it will make the first character have uppercase and the rest have lowercase. So this could be a useful method if you want to reformat the way that the string object is coming through. So let's say that this is the perfect method for us in this situation. If I now run this code cell, you can see that we return to the screen exactly what the method said it would do. It's capitalized the first letter, i.e. the I, and then it has love learning Python all in lowercase. So you can see that the love word has been changed into all lowercase, and the capital P in Python was also converted to lowercase. Now it's worth noting here that the original sentence variable hasn't been changed. So if I see what's stored in sentence, we still have the original sentence with the word love and the letter P in Python in capital letters. So if we actually wanted to store this new version of the string, this new reformatted capitalized version, we can actually assign this to a new variable. So if I create a variable called new_sentence and then set this equal to the sentence object with a dot, so we can place our dot notation, and then if I put CA, because we know our method starts with the letter CA, and then press Tab, we get a lot shorter list telling us that there are two methods that you could possibly be wanting to select from. In this case, we want capitalize, so if I press return, it saves us having to type it all out. I can then put parentheses and run this code cell. When I now take a look to see what's stored in new_sentence, we return that newly formatted string which is a capitalized version of the sentence object. So things to remember so far: when we want to run a specific method on a string object, which is a specific function that can be performed, we place the object name, we then place a dot, and we can then access the methods accordingly. We need to make sure that we put parentheses after the method's name, and we have to remember that the original object will not be changed. If we want the object to be changed, we could just reassign this to the variable sentence, or we can store it in a new variable accordingly. Okay, so with that introduction complete, let's now go through some useful methods when using a string object. So we can put sentence, we'll place a dot, and the next method we'll take a look at is count. So inside the parentheses, if I open up the documentation, you can see here that we return the number of non-overlapping occurrences of substring sub in string s. So what does this mean? Well, string s is the object that we're going to be using, so in our case it's sentence, and sub would be a substring. So let's start by counting the number of occurrences of the string n in lowercase. When I run this code cell, you can see that we bring back 3. And that's because we have 2 lowercase n's in learning, and we have 1 lowercase n in Python. Now, if I were to change this lowercase n to a lowercase o, what do you think will return as the result? Well, you can see that when I run this code cell with the letter O, we bring back 1. And that's because in the string that's stored in the sentence variable, we only have 1 lowercase o, even though we have 2 in total because we have an uppercase O in the word love. So just note here that the count method is case sensitive when performing this operation. Now another feature of the count method is that we get to pick and choose where we start the counting from. So if I change the lowercase o to an uppercase I and then run this code cell, you can see that we get 1 returned because we have an uppercase I at index 0. But I'm able to pass in a start and end index if I so desire. So if I wanted to start counting the occurrences of the uppercase I from index 1, you can see now I return 0 because the only occurrence of an uppercase I is at index 0. And because we're starting from 1, it therefore doesn't observe another one in the rest of the string. Okay, so moving on, let's now take a look at ends with. If I put sentence, dot, and then see what methods we have available, we can scroll down to ends with, and then we can put parentheses. Now you can see here if I open up the documentation, this method will return true if the string ends with the specified suffix. Otherwise it will bring back false. So if I were to put the lowercase n and then run this code cell, we know that the sentence ends with a lowercase n, so we return true as the result. If I were to change this to a lowercase o, we unsurprisingly get false returned. So this method will just check to see what the string ends with, and if it ends with the specific suffix that you pass into the parentheses, then it will return true. Okay, so moving on, we also have a very similar operation, but this time the method is starts with. So without going into too much detail, if I pass in a lowercase I into the parentheses, you can see that we obtain false because it starts with an uppercase I, so we get the result as expected. And if we were to pass in the uppercase I, we bring back true. So this method will check to see if a string starts with a specified prefix. Let's now take a look at the find method. So if I put sentence, then place a dot, and then scroll down to the find method, open up a set of parentheses, and then look in the documentation by pressing shift and then tab twice, you can see that this method will return the lowest index in the string, where the substring that we pass into the parentheses is found. So for example, if I pass in a capital L inside the parentheses, you can see that we bring back 2 as the result. And that's because the first occurrence of the capital L occurs at index 2, with the 0 index being capital I, the first index being an empty space, index 2 being the capital L. Now note here in the documentation that if we try to find something that doesn't exist in the string, then it will return -1 on failure. So let me quickly show you how this looks. If I try to find the lowercase z in our sentence variable, you can see that we bring back -1. So if a substring is found, you'll get the index back If a substring is not found, you will get the default result of -1. Now once again, we also have the option to choose where we start and end the search within our string. So for example, if I want to try to find the first occurrence of an empty space, I could put an empty space first, I can then put a comma. The second argument that we're going to pass into these parentheses will be in relation to the starting index where we want the find method to search from. So here, if I put index 3, for example, when I run this code, we get 6 returned. And that's because we're starting from the capital O within this sentence, and the first occurrence of an empty space after the capital O is actually at index 6. So you also have this option if your use case requires it. Now a very similar operation to the find method is the index method. So if we put sentence.index and place the capital L inside the parentheses, you can see that we bring back 2, which is exactly what the find method did. However, the difference between these two methods is that the index method will raise a value error when the substring is not found. So if we put sentence.index and pass in a lowercase z, you'll see that we run into an error stating substring not found. And this is important to note because as soon as we run into an error, our entire program will stop running. So if we use the index method at this point, if this line of code was in our script, our whole script would stop running. Whereas when we used the find method, when it didn't find the lowercase z, it returned -1, and the rest of the code in our script would continue running. So depending on what you want the intended result to look like at the end, maybe you want it to throw an error for you, you would need to pick your method accordingly. So you'll also notice that we have methods that start with is. So for example, if I put a string literal 10, then place a dot, and then put is and press tab, you can see we have many to choose from. So for example, if I pick is digit, it's going to return true if the string is a digit string. And you can see here we've included digits within the single quotes, so when I run this method, we bring back true. If I add an A into this string, so it no longer contains all digits, you can see we bring back false. And another interesting method that starts with is the is alpha. And the reason I want to show you this method is because it sometimes trips people up. If I put sentence.isAlpha and then take a look at the documentation, it will return true if the string is an alphabetic string. Otherwise it will bring back false. So what do you think this method will bring back? Well, let's take a look. When I run this code cell, you can see that we get false returned. And this is because the sentence variable isn't entirely alphabetic characters. We have some spaces. So if I remove these spaces and rerun the sentence variable, I can then come down and execute the isAlpha method, and we then return true. So note here that empty spaces are not considered as alphabetic, even though the rest of the string is. Okay, so let's just quickly go back and add those spaces in between the sentence words. The next couple of methods are very popular string methods, and these are known as lower and upper. So if I were to put sentence.lower with a set of parentheses, it just converts the entire string into lower case. And if I were to put sentence.upper, unsurprisingly, when we run this, it converts the whole string to upper case. So hopefully no issues here. Another common string method is the replace method. So if I put my variable name sentence, then place a dot, then look for the replace method, you can see that when I look at the docstring, it will return a copy with all occurrences of substring old replaced by new. And old being the first argument that we pass into the parentheses, and new being the second argument that we pass into the parentheses. So for example, if I want to replace the word Python for the words to code, I could put Python as the first argument, then place a comma, and then I can put the string to code as the second argument. When I then run this code cell, you can see that we've replaced reference to Python with to code. Now sometimes when you're performing data analysis or you're sourcing data from somewhere, the string isn't so clean. It contains data quality issues. For example, let's say I had the string hello, but before and after the string it contained some white space, i.e. some empty space. And I'm going to put this string 3 times. Now there are 3 methods that we can use that can help us clean up this data, known as data cleansing. So if I put a dot after the first string and put what's known as rstrip, and then place parentheses, what this will do is remove the white space from the right hand side of the string. So it strips from the right hand side, hence rstrip. When I run this code cell, you can see that we then have space on the left hand side, we then have hello, and the white space after the O has been stripped. Hopefully it comes as no surprise, but we have a method called lstrip, and this does exactly the same, but this time it strips the white space from the left hand side. Now usually, to be on the safe side, if you want to make sure that white space is removed from both sides of a string, you can simply just use the strip method and this will remove the white space from both sides. So when I run this code cell, you can see that we then bring back the string hello, and it's much cleaner than the original string which contained those spaces either side. And conscious of time, I'm going to bring up one more method which you will sometimes observe in other code, and that is the title method. So if I put sentence dot and then put title and open parentheses, if we take a look at the docstring, you can see that we return a version of the string where each word is title cased. More specifically, words start with uppercased characters and all remaining cased characters have lowercase. So every word will start with a capital letter. When I run this code cell, you can see that we bring back I love learning Python with the first letter of each word capitalized. So hopefully now you're starting to see how we can call upon methods on a specific string object to perform specific operations. We simply place a dot, then the method name, and then open parentheses. You would have noticed that some of the methods will require you to pass some information into the brackets in order to customize the specific methods. Practice using these methods on your own string objects, and furthermore, try utilizing the other methods that are available by pressing dot, tab, searching for a method, and then inside the parentheses, pressing shift and tab. This will give you the documentation, and you should be able to try to interpret what that method will do on that string object. You'll be seeing a lot more of methods when we work with other data structures, but there is one more method that I want to share with you in the next video, which is known as the format method. And we'll be using the format method a lot in subsequent parts of the course. So I'll see you in the next video.